Marcel Leyat conceived the Leyat Helica, his plane without wings. It's powered by a 1.1 litre flat twin ABC Scorpion and a propeller, of course. The body is made from plywood and the passengers sit one behind the other, and I think he's not going to be able to stop, so he will come straight across. Leyat designed his own special wheels, as you can see, using aluminium discs with integrated brakes to further reduce drag. It has cable-operated rear-wheel steering, so not easy to keep in a straight line, but hopefully...
Look at that, Richard. What do you think of that? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, you probably won't be surprised to know that only 2 original cars and this is an empty replica from the original car, now in the Musée des Arts. The influence that the teardrop or raindrop design had on aerodynamicists in the 20s and 30s could not be any clearer. So we can imagine electric driverless cars copying this shape one day. So that's the 1921 Leyat Helica, ladies and gentlemen.
That rear wheel steering's making the Aston Martin driver a bit nervous, I think.
Well, that is a wonderful start to this drive-by, fly-by of all the concourse cars, ladies and gentlemen. And the next car coming up is this 1950 Aston Martin DB2 Drophead Coupe prototype. This is the second in a brand new line of sports cars built to bear the DB initials after the company's new owner, David Brown. Sporting the new 3-litre twin-cam 4-cylinder engine with stylish modern lines penned by Frank Healey, the DB2 caused a sensation at the 1950 New York Auto Show. The all-new car was a success on the racetrack as well, with works entries at the 1950 Le Mans, finishing 5th and 6th overall. No mean feat for a largely untested car.
Please do drive up, and if you'd like to stop, we'd be happy to see you. And Richard, this particular DB2 Drophead is a well-known car itself, as it was in fact the prototype car built for the 1950 London Motor Show. It then became David Brown's personal runabout, as well as a press demonstrator, featured in numerous magazines. The first early DB2s can easily be identified by these grills in the side, and also the triple washboard grille in 3 pieces. It later became 1 piece. And also I believe they have column shift. Is this a column shift or a floor shift? It's a floor shift example. So I think the very early ones had column shift, but later when they looked to racing, they decided that floor shift was a better option for them. This car sadly fell into disrepair before being resurrected in 1970, and now presents, as it should, of course, very, very beautifully. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for coming along.
You two look very nice too.
Thank you. Equally well restored, I would say. Now next, Peter, we have this 1958 BMW 507, one of only 253 examples built.
Yeah, and this car, Richard, you know, it's a V8, presented in a very desirable specification, including these lovely Rudge wheels with the BMW logo in the middle. Elvis Presley drove a BMW 507, John Surtees drove a 507, Ursula Andress drove a 507. But do any of them have the sort of adventure you're going to tell us about now, Richard?
Well, this car rolled off the production line on the 4th of July 1958 and was delivered to the famous French dealer Imperial Garage just over a month later. In April 1960, the car was made available for a very short period to the Greek ambassador, Leonidas Papagos. He was the son of Alexandros Papagos, Prime Minister of Greece from 1952 to 55. Now, a month later, the BMW was returned to Imperial Garage, where a well-known and wealthy Lebanese couple fell in love with the car. They bought it for their son as a gift to mark the imminent end of his studies at the London School of Economics. And the 507 was sent to London and kept in the garage of their family home. That summer, the young owner drove his BMW from London to Munich, where the manufacturer carried out some tests and minor repairs. He continued on to Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and finally Genoa, where the car embarked for Lebanon. He recalls that throughout his journey he was stopped countless times by people asking what the car was. The 507 was then held in Beirut, where it was regularly driven and even served as his wedding car in April 1969. Now, when the Civil War started in 1975, the family became worried that something might happen to their son's precious car and companion of many adventures. They asked their friend Munir Abu Haidar, president of Trans-Mediterranean Airways, for help. He took charge of the problem, then sent the BMW on a London-bound company plane on the 6th of June 1975, and he continued to use it during his stays in England.
And Richard, in spring of 2014, an Italian collector spotted this car in a Kensington side street, as you do, fascinated by the state of conservation. He clearly showing its age, but he wanted to buy it, so he left a note under the windscreen asking if he could buy the car as a gift to his wife. He didn't receive any calls for several months. He lost all hope until one day in July, while on holiday in Corfu, he received the long-awaited communication, and finally he was able to purchase this very car. And as we've said so many times, it's the stories as well as the cars and the owners that count, and you look delightful. It suits you.
Thank you very much for bringing it. This is the 1965 Lancia Flaminia SS by Zagato. The Flaminia Berliner was launched at the Geneva Salon in 1957 and would evolve into many different guises. The successor to the highly coveted B20 GT and adopted the sophisticated V6 motor which had first appeared in the Aurelia. The final iteration of the Flaminia was the Super Sport from 1964 and, as presented here, one of just 150 built. Of all the Flaminias, the Super Sport Zagato model is the fastest and the most sought after. Drivers enjoyed the 152 horsepower from the 2.8-litre V6 motor with triple Webers, which meant it was good for 130 miles an hour.
And we talk so often about speed, power, horsepower, but it's also about refinement, handling, and the Flaminia had perfectly balanced handling because it was driven via a transaxle, giving it much better weight distribution. And this example has clearly benefited from a full nut and bolt restoration in this lovely neutral metallic silver, which really does complement these tight Zagato lines. It was restored by Lancia experts Thornley Kellam, presenting it today. And classic Lancias were innovative, sophisticated, refined and competitive motorcars in their day, up there with the very best from Italy. Many Italians will tell you in the early 60s these cars were as good as their Ferrari equivalents. They were driven by celebrities and race drivers of the era, including, of course, La Dolce Vita's Marcello Mastroianni. And to many, this car, the Flaminia, was the last true Lancia. Thank you for bringing it.
Well, now we move on to this 1955 HWM Jaguar. Delighted our chairman of the selection committee, Greg Fiskin, has brought the car over. This sensational HWM was a famous racing marque in the 1950s and one of those sadly forgotten marques today, although the company still exists. HWM stood for Hersham and Walton Motors. It was founded by George Abacassis and John Heath, both competent racing drivers themselves. Sadly, Heath was killed following an accident during the 1956 Mille Miglia. Now, HWM enjoyed some success in single-seat race cars. Sterling Moss, Peter Collins and Paul Frere all made their GP debuts in HWM. And HWM were also the first proper marque to employ Jaguar's race-proven six-cylinder race unit in sports racing cars. The trend will be followed by many others.
And it's built, Richard, on a twin tubes chassis, and I think there are a lot of styling cues from other cars of the era. I mean, I personally can see a little bit of a Maserati A6 GCS, perhaps a bit of almost birdcage at the back, although the birdcage came later. But but what I love about this car is this muscular, really, this wide grille at the front, just made for sucking in air, almost like an athlete looking to go as quickly as possible. It's running on drum brakes, and it features the wraparound, pre-appendix C wraparound screen that you would see on D-types of the era. Makes you feel like you're a fighter pilot. They later changed that to a full width screen for the regulations. This car was raced by a who's who of British sports car racing drivers: Noel Cunningham-Reid, Dick Prothero, Peter Blond, who'll be here on Sunday, Jack Fairman, Les Leston. This is a wonderful piece of British racing car design, and we celebrate it. Thank you for bringing it.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the 1957 Jaguar XK150S Coupe by Bertone. Thank you, Danny, for bringing this. Launched in 1957, the XK150S was the ultimate evolution of Jaguar's highly successful XK series. Powered by the 3.8-litre motor as fitted to the E-Type, it was also the most powerful. And presented here is a sensational example of the stylish creativity and the coach builder's craftsmanship. There is little giving away the fact that there is a Jaguar XK150S rolling chassis underneath this sublime work of art, except perhaps the central grille and the badging.
And this Scaglione was the creative genius behind some of the most striking cars of the 20th century, including the Alfa Romeo Bat cars and the absolutely drop-dead gorgeous Alfa Romeo Tipo 33 Stradale. This is one of 8 XK150 chassis reimagined, and it was penned by the great Franco Scaglione working for Bertone. The lines are extremely modern with thin pillars, lots of glass, and the rear fins may have been inspired a bit by the Bat cars themselves. The Bertone prototypes were in fact rumoured to have been built as possible XK150 successors rather than the E-Type, which of course came later and was rather successful. But interesting to note the XKE badge on the side of this car, and of course the Jaguar script, which is very familiar. Purchased new in 1958 by Tommaso Ingenoli, a friend of and customer of Enzo Ferrari himself. It spent many years in the esteemed Black Hawk collection in California, and this is the sole XK150 Bertone believed still existing, so it's a privilege to see it, and thank you.
Thanks, Danny. It's in a striking 1933 Rolls-Royce Phantom 2 Continental Touring Saloon by Barker. We're very grateful to Johan and Michelle Poonawalla from India to bring this car to be here today. I love the fact this is a touring saloon body, so not a big one, you understand. This is a touring saloon body by Barker & Company due to the fact it has 4 doors. However, the tight lines on the Continental chassis could easily have belonged on a coupe, so the owner must have had a keen eye and perhaps been a connoisseur of fine motor cars.
I think he probably was a connoisseur of fine motor cars, Richard, and he was pretty good at driving them too, because this car was in fact built for mythical speed ace Sir Malcolm Campbell. Campbell owned 3 Phantoms and loved them so much that he wrote for the brochure the best Rolls-Royce yet produced. And I think he knew a thing or two about motor cars.
He did.
It has a number of special order features ordered by Campbell, such as the low rake steering column, not that you can see it because it's too low, wider tracks, special dampers, and a St. Christopher fixed to the dash. Do have a look, do have a close look. Recently acquired by the present owner, it's soon to be shipped to India to form part of a very special museum collection. It's really wonderful and a fabulous history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love this car. This is the 1928 4.5 litre Bentley by Salmons & Son. Thank you, Christopher, for bringing the car along. Now this car, ladies and gentlemen, is affectionately known as Mr. Fred. The handsome Drophead Sports Coupe is one of only 2 to have been coach built at Salmons & Sons of Newport Pagnell. And this example was the personal seed of Fred Salmon himself, hence the pet name. It features sensuously curved front wings as well as rear, and the body is formed entirely out of aluminium. Another notable feature is the distinctive mother-of-pearl instrument panel, which you've got to have a look inside to see, a style often found on exotic European machines such as the Mercedes-Benz 540K.
And it was interesting, Richard, Salmons & Sons were in fact bought by Aston Martin in the 1950s. So a nice twist in the history of this car. It returned to the original Salmon & Sons building in Newport Pagnell for its 1980s restoration. So it's lovely to think that it went back to that building, and now it's absolutely beautifully presented. And I love the grey, it really suits the car, sets off the sort of the chrome, and it really works well. It's a beautiful car. Thank you so much.
It does. I mean, if this was a saloon, you call it a doctor or a hard
Doctor's Coupe. Yeah, it's got that look about it.
Yeah, it's got a lovely look, and the detail on the door you have to see. So do go and see Mr. Fred, and thank you very much for bringing him.
Bye, Fred. Thanks, Fred. So we've got a bit of a something from France, the 1949 Delahay 135 MS Cabriolet by Viotti. A historic mark. Delahay was in fact, began producing motor cars as early as 1894. And in its early history, Delahay also powered racing motorboats. They built the engines for them, but they weren't making money from that, so they concentrated on motorsport, and they were very successful. But what really put them on the map was an event which we're going to refer to rather a lot today, when they won the pinnacle of motorsport, the 24 hours at Le Mans in 1938. Delahay also unveiled in 1938 the 135 model, as you can see here. It was unveiled in Paris. It was available in many forms, including upgraded variants, such as the Modifié, the M, and the Modifié Speciale or Special, as you can see here.
And Delahay 135s are also well known for being clothed in some of the most extravagant and flamboyant one-off bodies by the leading French carrosserie of the time, such as Fagodi and Falaschi, Franet and Salchip. And the French are pretty good at Art Deco. However, this rare cabriolet example is one of just the 3 examples bodied by lesser-known Torinese coach builders Viotti. The Viotti regularly worked for Fiat, Lancia and Alfa Romeo, which is why, Peter, it's interesting to see the resemblance to the Alfa Romeo grille. And this very rare motorcar has had just 2 previous owners. It was discovered in Switzerland in 1988 in a very sorry state, but thankfully it was rescued and subjected to a painstaking 10-year restoration involving much research to present it as beautifully as it is today. So thank you so much for bringing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So here's a gorgeous 1926 Bentley 3-litre red label by Van Plant. Thank you, Chris, for bringing it. Now, in the 1920s, Bentley was not only an extremely successful racing car, it was glamorous, and in the 20s heyday, affiliated with flapping skirts, jazz, and daredevil aviation pioneers. And look at the, don't they look the part? Following a tough Le Mans, Bentley team car Old Number 7, one of the best known 3-litres, battle-scarred and bent, was rolled into the Savoy Hotel dining room during its own victory dinner. And one of the things we love about these old cars is the personal story that goes with them.
And Richard, this car has a lovely story. It's been in the same family since the 1950s, undergone 2 restorations, a car-loving family, racers as well. I see a racer in the driver's seat here. It was, in fact, used to take this driver to school. Obviously, it was already a classic at that stage. It wasn't a new car, was it, Chris? Built in 1926, the car, not Chris, as a red label speed chassis. Speed models sit on the cut-down frame and are powered by higher compression engine, driving through the A-type transmission, the closer ratio transmission. Only 513 red label speed models were built. This car is very well conserved. It has most of its original body, all of its original mechanical components, and as we know, that's quite unusual on a Bentley. So it's also a special factory model built to celebrate Bentley's success at the Isle of Man TT. But just a couple of words, Chris, as I've got my extended microphone. So what were the other boys going to school in those days?
Well, that's a good question. Where I was at prep school, we were really looked down on because we had a really old car. But I recall some of my classmates had taken in things like Jaguar Mark 7s, and I think somebody had a Continental Bentley, and really posh cars, whereas we were the poor relations.
And so, I mean, we know you as a car lover, connoisseur, and a great enthusiast, often to be seen late at night, tinkering, enjoying that while everyone else is having some rosé. But was it this car that really ignited your passion for cars?
No, as a matter of fact, it wasn't. This car almost turned me off motor cars because my father was a perfectionist, and he would be very proud of the car today, and he only actually died this year at nearly 101. So he's probably looking down and very...
Tool company for the aircraft industry, Facel began producing motorcar bodies for Simca and Panhard. The original Facel Vega was introduced in 1954 as a handsome 4-seat luxury car fitted with a trusty and great sounding American V8. The HK500 was introduced in this model was introduced in 1959, and 500 examples were built, finishing in 1961. And they were advertised with the slogan, "For the few who own the finest." So, what can you say about that?
Well, not what you've written. The thumping power from the 6.6-litre Chrysler V8, they were the pinnacle of luxury with this 4-seat high-speed motoring spec. The tubular chassis was designed by British racing driver Lance Macklin, and the claimed top speed was 147 miles an hour. Stylish, glamorous and exotic in the 60s, they soon became favoured by celebrities of the era, including Tony Curtis, Ava Gardner and Ringo Starr. Mechanics Illustrated magazine tester Tom McCahill said the HK500 was, and I quote, "sexier than a Place Pigalle and throatier than a Russian peso." Thank you very much for bringing it.
Can you say that again? Please.
So now we have a 1958 Ferrari 250 GT Eleanor. The Ferrari 250 name was awarded to an array of different Ferrari models, both competition and road. It basically denotes that there is a 3-litre V12 under the bonnet. Born out of the Europa, the 250 GT road car was first introduced in 1954 and was built by Pininfarina, who were to become, of course, Ferrari's leading coach builder. However, production challenges meant that Pininfarina temporarily turned to Mario Buono for assistance, and the model became known as the 250 GT Buono. In 1957, Mario moved on to the Fiat styling team, and his son-in-law Ezio Elena took over the building of the 250 GT.
And just 50 Eleanor coupes were built, the first of which still had the low roofline as per the Buono built cars. These have a slightly higher roofline. It's interesting, they're also very often presented in two-tone colour schemes as this one. They've become extremely rare because many of these bodies were these cars were unloved and rebodied and remodeled to replicate things like Tour de France's. So actually there's about 15 estimated to be surviving today. The Eleanor achieved some competition success as well at the Nürburgring and the Tour de France, and this model is a beautifully presented example of a car which is now becoming increasingly rare. So thank you for bringing it. Of course, after this, production returned to Pininfarina, so they are very rare, and that's a very understated Ferrari. Look at you. I haven't seen you for a while. It's me. Oh, I see. Hello, Jeremy. How are you? Nice to see you. So this is a 1952 Porsche 550 Sport Roadster, or America Roadster. The forerunner, in fact, to the very well-known legendary motor car, an instantly recognizable motor car, the Porsche 356 Speedster. This is the Type 540, also known as the America Roadster. The US importer Max Hoffman had convinced Porsche that it needed a lightweight convertible to compete with the offerings from Jaguar and Austin Healey, whose largest markets were, of course, the US. So this model was born.
It only had minimal weather protection, but could keep up with larger sports cars of the era. However, production was far too expensive, and only 17 America Roadsters were built, with many raced successfully by wealthy gentlemen drivers. Having tested the market, the stripped-back avant-garde 356 Speedster was born and sold in the thousands. Special external fuel filler and wire mesh headlights covers point to the racing exploits of this car, which is believed to be the only example in Europe. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Well, next up, Richard, is a 1960 MGA twin-cam works Sebring competition car. The MGA was in fact a huge commercial success. Over 100,000 cars were built, the majority go into North America, although very few were twin-cam examples, only around 3,000 I believe. It's very much a motor car for bombing around the English countryside, chewing a pipe and sporting a flat cap, as this owner does. But this is a very different car from those mass-produced production cars. UMO 93 was part of a team of just 3 works cars, plus a practice car, prepared for the BMC Works department and entered for Sebring in 1960. And this actual car finished 4th in class and 29th overall. Not a bad achievement. It went on racing in SCCA events, the Sports Car Club of America, driven sparingly on the road up until around 1970, when the clutch failed and it retired with a mere 5,139 miles on the odometer.
And then in 2003, a thorough mechanical restoration was carried out by the rest of the car, but the rest of the car was left untouched, leaving it exactly as it was when it left Sebring in 1960, still bearing the names of the drivers painted on the side of the car. Competition features include the close ratio gearbox, limited slip diff, aluminium hardtop, the bonnet scoop, the extra air intake and outlet, and twin driving lamps and long-distance fuel tank. So many race cars have been crashed, bent, modified and molested, but this historic racing MGA is the only remaining unrestored BMC works-prepared car, still in its original condition from its 1960 race configuration, and it still only records 6,500 miles from new. Thank you very much for bringing it.
Time warp condition, like its owner. So next, Richard, is the 1959 Austin Healey 3000 Mark I works Sebring competition car. And again, obviously, Sebring was an important event to enter in the 1950s and do well. Developed from the 106 or the big Healey 3000, which is one of the best-loved British sports cars of all time. It was often referred to, in fact, as the hairy-chested British sports car, but this is being driven by the lovely Vanessa Finberg, so we better not say that. But they were also rallied and raced with great aplomb, and this is one of those competition Healeys, Richard.
Yeah, it's a full works-prepared racer built for the factory team drivers. No bumpers, lightweight fiberglass hardtop fitted, and many other racing modifications. And the famous Jack Sears originally used this car to test 3-piston girding brakes for BMC at Silverstone. And the car was also works BMC entry at the 1960 Sebring 12 Hours and raced in a variety of sports car club of America events. Vanessa, thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Vanessa. Next we have another important British sports racing car, the 1960 Aston Martin DB4 GT with its owner Anthony Moody. And this car may look similar to the road-going DB4, but that's where the similarities end. It's much rarer, of course. The DB4 GT is one of just 45 made in right-hand drive from a total production of 75. Its chassis has been shortened by 5 inches. It has external fuel filler. It's much lighter. It has a twin-plug cylinder head, so it has 12 spark plugs in total on a 6-cylinder engine. Power was increased to over 300 horsepower, which was a lot for a late 1950s 6-cylinder motor. The rear seats were removed. Glass was replaced with Perspex. The drivers went on diets, and this resulted in a 200-pound weight saving overall.
And another visual cue, Peter, distinguishing this from the standard car is the headlights, which are moved back and fed in behind Perspex, as you can see, a look that would stick on the DB5. Now, competition successes abound, and many of the greatest drivers of the period raced DB4 GTs. This car has always been in the UK and belonged for a period to the pioneering historic race of the Honourable Patrick Lindsay. The DB4 GT is the sort of car that will be raced on a Sunday and driven to the office on a Monday, and no doubt that's still the case. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you for bringing it. Thank you. Well, next, Richard, we've got a slightly later car.